Damn, let's talk some shit.
It's Polly Siegel.
And Victoria Aaron.
Two licensed therapists who've spent way too much money on degrees, certifications, and trainings. We both love what we do and couldn't imagine working in any other profession. But we're forced to be serious all the time, and that gets boring. Shit Talking Shrinks discusses important mental health topics, the human experience, and society at large, while poking fun along the way. It won't be all fun and games because after every episode, you'll walk away with tangible tools to navigate life more effectively.
We love a tangible tool. Episode 3. Set those boundaries, bitch.
Boundaries.
Ooh, wah, wah, wah.
Oh, this topic is hard.
Super hard and big.
And thick.
Yeah.
No, boundaries, this is a topic that comes up a lot in our clinical practice because, one, boundaries are necessary to develop healthy and thriving relationships, but they're also one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah, and I think also boundaries are there to protect us, not to harm others, right? Not to punish others. And so like the way I function in a lot of relationships, especially like in my past, right, is like I give and I give and I give and I have no boundaries, no attention paid to my own needs. And then I end up a martyr, right? And I end up kind of like bleeding myself dry and being like, fuck them. But it's like I made those choices because I had no boundaries.
Quite frankly, you fucked yourself.
I fuck myself 100%. And I think it's really important in this work when we're learning about boundaries to recognize that a lot of times we fuck ourselves. It's much easier to look at the other person and be like, they took advantage of me. They hurt me. Hold on, bitch. How did you play a part in that? Most likely you did not have boundaries. And that's because of society. It's because of what we're taught in our households, right? And it's a learned practice.
And I think that's very important to recognize that when it comes to boundaries, it is about setting parameters that keep you safe.
Yes.
Because a lot of times when someone's violating our boundaries, it's because the other person wasn't aware what was okay and what was not.
And everybody comes from their own fuck shit, right? So like you're raised in a certain way, you see certain things happen. And a lot of times, like especially in toxic relationships, right, where there are no boundaries, it's like you're the lock and key to each other's boundaryless bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean when I say that? If I have a difficulty with managing how much I give and I partner up with somebody who's a taker, right? It's a lock and key. It's a perfect fit. Right. And so, boom, toxic ass relationship.
Well, and that's happening with a lot of people, right? There's one, I mean, in some ways, that's what codependency is about, right? One person is requiring a lot of resources and energy and attention. Yeah. And then the other person in that relationship is selfless and overly generous. And then this vicious cycle happens where one person's needs are getting met, but the other person, there's so much self-neglect because the boundaries weren't in place.
And here's the interesting thing, because I'm the overgiver, right? Here's the interesting thing about the overgiver. It's not actually selfless. It's serving a purpose in me. I'm seeking something. I don't just unconditionally give and I'm like, it's all good. I'm a martyr.
Well, I don't want to speak for you, but it's a survival mechanism.
100%. Cue neurotic Jewish mother.
Yeah, cue neurotic Jewish mothers.
We love them.
We love them, but they have very poor boundaries.
Very, very poor. And I'm sure it's across the board, right? But we're two Jewesses and that's what we know.
And again, we're making a generalization around Jewish mothers, and I'm sure there are some out there with fabulous boundaries, but the majority of them don't have great boundaries.
Where they at, though?
And where they at, though? And culturally.
Yeah.
So, like, let's bring culture into the conversation as well. I think there are a lot of cultures that don't prioritize boundaries. And so within the family unit, boundaries aren't taught, they're not prioritized, and they're not encouraged. And in fact, what happens in so many families is that if you set boundaries, you're problematic. You're creating issues. You're ruffling feathers. Yeah. And so as a society, we've learned that boundaries are bad. Boundaries are hurtful. Boundaries are selfish. When in fact, boundaries keep us safe. Boundaries allow us to thrive within a relationship. It creates healthful energy between relationships, and it keeps both people or groups of people in a position where their needs are being met.
And I think too, to have boundaries in a relationship in the beginning, it creates like a very long lasting, healthful relationships
Absolutely.
because you're able to identify your own needs and you're also able to honor somebody else's needs.
Yes, absolutely. So in this episode, we are cheerleaders for boundaries, and we're going to encourage them for anyone who's listening. Boundaries are good, they're healthy, they enhance relationships, and they're going to allow your needs and the other person's needs to be met.
Amen. Take us to church or temple.
Amen, sister friend.
Yes.
No church for me, please.
Or temple. Whatever. Or the mosque. I don't care.
Yeah, you're not going to find me in a mosque.
Just take us there. Wherever.
Okay, so boundaries is like an umbrella term,
Yes.
but there's a bunch of different types of boundaries, and we need to speak to that so people can understand how to start setting them.
Speak it.
First type of boundary, physical. Who, when, how, and how much others can touch you, and vice versa.
Touch me.
I'm touching you right now.
Nobody can see, but it's happening.
And
I'm welcoming it.
And no one knows where I'm touching her. Okay, so again, who, when, how much is it okay to be touched?
Yeah.
I have met people
Yeah.
where I go in for a hug and I can viscerally see their body clam up.
Yeah.
It tends to be waspy people. Sorry
Yeah.
to call those folks out.
Yeah.
Definitely not Jewish people.
Those motherfuckers don't want to be touched.
Right? There's a physical boundary. And then you have other people where they love to be touched and cuddled.
Yeah.
So you have to learn to advocate your physical boundaries around touch.
Mm-hmm.
That can be in your intimate partnership. That could be with friends. That might be around family. And if you don't like hugs or you don't like to be touched, then sharing that with someone.
Yeah. Like, hey, bitch, don't touch me.
Or if you want to do it in a more charismatic way, like, hey, I'm not a big hugger.
Yeah. And then it's on the other person to not take that personally.
And let me emphasize a huge part of boundaries. Other people are going to feel uncomfortable by them.
Absolutely.
Boundaries are not always comfortable, and the other person might have an emotional response to them. They might reject it. They might be antagonistic about it.
Right.
Another person might not feel comfortable, and that is okay.
Right. It's not the business of the boundary setter.
So if I set a boundary with you, Victoria, and you're not happy about it, I have to sit in the discomfort that is okay. I'm going to allow you to feel the emotions and the internal experience of that boundary. And it's not up to me to own that for you.
But please know, Polly, I will always violate your boundaries. Moving on.
We have to accept that the other person might be displeased, and
Yes.
that is okay. It's not our job to keep other people protected. Okay, second type of boundary is emotional boundaries. What do I consider acceptable treatment within a relationship? Do others respect and treat me well? Do I reciprocate that? Emotionally, what parameters do I need to set with my intimate partner or friends or family?
Yeah.
Colleagues, bosses, whoever it is.
Yeah.
So get really clear with yourself. What are the emotional boundaries?
You know, okay, so just a personal tidbit. This has been really interesting. Like, obviously, you know this, right? And our listeners are finding out. So I've been in the dating scene now for like 7 months, right? Like I was in a long-term relationship. One of the things that I find most frustrating, and I think that this is just speaking to like society's issue with boundaries, is like when somebody is not able to provide emotionally, right? What maybe they promise or what maybe I'm expecting. And the lack of clear communication around that really is distressing. And so it's like, for me, my boundary is being really clear about what I expect and what I need. And if that person says they can do it, but they don't do it, right? Then it's my business to get the fuck out.
Right. And what you're speaking to is the emotional boundaries as you interact with different people in the dating scene.
Yes.
You're very clear. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I expect.
Yes.
This is how I demand to be treated, to be honored.
Yes.
And that's all emotional. And if the other person can't show up, then it's on you to say, this doesn't work for me.
Right.
Best of luck.
Best of luck, kid.
Best of luck in your endeavors.
Yeah. Fuck off.
Or just to fuck off.
Yeah, I love a good fuck off.
Third type of boundaries, spiritual. Now, this one is often missed. We don't talk about spiritual boundaries. How much of my belief system do I want someone to know? Do I want to share my belief system and spirituality and practices with another person? Who am I willing to share my spirituality with? So being able to know what feels safe and what doesn't. I mean, there are certain groups of people where I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing about my spirituality.
I can't agree. It's not my experience, but I respect.
So you feel like you've been able to share your spirituality with everyone?
I have to. It's essential to my life. It's like it's part of, how I'm here doing this podcast with you right now.
So think about that. What are my spiritual boundaries?
Think about it.
All right. One of our favorites, sexual boundaries.
Sexual boundaries.
So this one is when, with whom, and how much of my sexuality and beliefs about sexuality do I share? Sexual boundaries go beyond the scope of just sexual activity. They include jokes, innuendos, gestures, and so on. Anything that's sexual in nature. What allows you to feel comfortable? So, I mean, we see this in the workplace, right? Where dudes are making dick jokes and there's like the secretary in the office. I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say that all secretaries are female, but there's that female
For
person.
stereotypical purposes.
For stereotypical purposes, you have like a bunch of dudes. They're making dick jokes. They're talking about, what porn they watched.
Yeah.
And that fucking makes that female employee uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't even matter if they identify as female. It could make a non-binary person uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to be not only aware around like sexual touch, but just any sexual dialogue in nature.
Such a bummer.
I personally love dick jokes.
I love a good dick joke.
I love a good dick joke. I love to hear about what people are wanking off to.
Yeah, buck up, Chuck. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, it's like, but we have a different tolerance, right? And like, it's important for individuals to know their own tolerance. And like, I don't know, do dicks need to be talked about in specific workplaces? Probably not.
Probably not.
But if I'm in the porn industry and dude's talking about his dick, I better expect it.
I better expect it.
And I'm taking one.
There's also also sexually, there are certain boundaries. Like, I don't like butt sex. Anal is not for me. That's a hard boundary. I don't care if you have a 2-inch cock or a 10-inch cock. I don't want it in my butt.
She ain't wanting it in there.
But I know a lot of people that love anal, right?
Yeah.
That's a green light.
It's so sick.
Being aware around what sexual content is comfortable to you and what's not, and advocating it.
Yes.
It's okay to say to a friend, like, that joke makes me feel uncomfortable. Please do not talk about things like that in front of me.
Yeah. Actually, and so because we talk about tangible tools, right? Like a good way to state boundaries is to say, that there's this formula that I taught when I worked in treatment centers, right? Like, when you blank, I feel blank. I'd appreciate if you blank. So like, when you say a dick joke, I feel uncomfortable. I'd appreciate if you no longer said dick jokes. It's a tried and true tool. It works so well. And if the other person can't handle that, fuck them.
No, I mean, if the other person can't handle it, allow them to not handle it.
Right.
You have to honor that boundary, but also they fucking suck.
Yeah. Fuck them. You don't need them in your life.
No, I mean, all jokes aside, Victoria, right? Like, if another person viscerally responds to something, then we have to honor it.
Sure.
But we can also choose who we associate with. If there's a group of people or someone who can't vibe with your energy, then you can make the conscious choice to not spend time with that person.
Better way of saying fuck them.
All right, last but very not least, intellectual boundaries. So, how are my thoughts and ideas received? Are they considered? Are they rejected? Am I provided access to information and learning?
Mhm.
Right? So, what are your intellectual boundaries?
I have none.
Because you're not an intellectual.
I'm fucking brilliant, but I just don't give a fuck.
Who do you think's smarter, me or you?
Never thought about it. We're smart in different ways, right? Like you
Yeah.
have the lists and the books and the this, and I'm just from the whatever center of my brain spitting out shit. Probably sounds smarter.
No.
Don't be so humble, Wally.
Comment.
Yeah.
Tell us who you think sounds smarter.
Yeah, bitches, comment.
Is it Victoria or is it Polly? Who seems smarter on these podcasts?
We're going to set up a poll.
There's going to be a poll. All right, so let's recap.
Okay.
Physical boundaries,
Yep.
Emotional, spiritual, sexual, intellectual.
Yeah.
As you enter into 2023, we invite you to think about these areas and write them out. What do your physical, sexual, intellectual, spiritual boundaries look like? And how do your boundaries differ depending on the person?
Yes.
Your boundaries might be different with your mom than with your best friend, than with your boss, than with your colleague. And it's okay to have those boundaries look different depending on who you're interacting with.
Yeah. I think it's also important to note, right? So, like, all of these systems are already in place, right? With your existing relationships, whether it's intimate, boss, like you said, you recounted them really good, right? So, like, what's going to happen is when you start to set boundaries, different boundaries, if you are setting different boundaries, it's going to be uncomfortable for the system. All systems love homeostasis. So just prepare yourself to sit in the discomfort. This is what you talked about earlier. You will feel distress, and so will the other parties.
And distress is temporary. I tell my clients this all the time. It's like a wave. It builds up in the ocean, it crashes, and then it goes back out to sea.
It recedes.
It recedes. It is always temporary. When mom gets upset when you set a boundary, it's temporary. When you let your friend down because you couldn't help them that night, it's temporary. When you say to your boyfriend, girlfriend, I don't want to do anal, that might suck, but it's temporary.
Sick.
It's temporary, baby.
It's all temporary.
Get on your surfboard and ride the wave.
That is corny as shit, but I love it.
We love you guys.
Big love.
We want to hear all about your journey and boundaries. You can comment. You can share your struggles in it. We want to hear it all. And we hope that boundary setting leads to a little bit more vitality.
Amen.
Bye, guys.